So you're getting into combat design in Dungeons & Dragons or your favorite tabletop role-playing game. So you go online and you watch some of the greatest advice you can find on choosing combat types and setting up objectives and timers, and your fight still falls flat, and you're not sure why. The answer is probably one small missing ingredient: pacing. So today I'm going to explain to you the concept of 3-round rhythm in encounter design. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and today I want to dig into the technique I've been using for a long time to help guide my encounter design so that they don't stagnate. So no matter how complicated I've set up the fight, ensuring that they stay interesting round after round. Now before we dig into my 3-round rhythm, there are 2 videos I highly recommend you check out here on YouTube. The first is by Dadi over at MysticArts DM. He created this excellent 8 types of combat video that breaks down the fundamentals of setting up different fights. That one is one of the best primers for creating your initial structure of a fight. And the second one is by Anton over at Emergent GM. He recently did a video about setting objectives and timers to spice up your fights. And if you combine these 2 videos, you have almost everything you would need to make interesting, awesome battles. And the 3-round rhythm I'm about to present is simply adding on top of what their excellent work has already built. So let me know if this sounds familiar to you. You set up a fight with some objectives, and on the first round of combat, the players and the enemies, they jockey for position and start setting up their abilities. The next round, they really lean into it, damage is exchanged, maybe some big guns are brought out, big spells, big cooldown abilities, resources are consumed. And then round 3 feels like mostly a repetition of round 2, and then round 4 feels about the same as round 3, and this continues on for a little longer than you'd like, and pretty soon the players are just defaulting to their cantrips and basic attacks. And that stagnation can come about from even the most well-designed fight simply because the parameters of the fight don't change round after round. And the 3-round rhythm helps shake that up. So the 3-round rhythm goes establish, engage, and then either end or escalate. Round 1, establish. This is where you set up the fight itself, what the goals are, what the pressures are going to be, what the timers are. This is where the players get to think about what sort of fight they're even getting into, or think they're getting into. The players will often jockey for position, do their initial movements, and set up their spells for later effects, like putting some enemies to sleep, so that the players on the next round can start executing them. Maybe some of your support characters are casting helpful magics on your warriors to enhance them for later turns, or the ranged characters are moving back into cover and getting ready to start sniping. The players are starting to establish their battle lines in the first round of combat and exchanging some light initial blows. Round 2 is engage. This is where all the major abilities of both sides start to come online. Maybe the dragon uses their dragon breath. The payoff from the earlier round setup starts to come in with a hasted and divine shielded and greater invisibility barbarian gets to go berserk and start slaying enemies left and right. You'll start to see some enemies maybe drop at this point or become very wounded, and the players will take some substantive damage as well. This is the heart of the fight. And it's an opportunity for the players and the enemies to show off what they can really do. You'll often see their big guns brought out in round 2 simply because round 1, they're still trying to decide what sort of investment they want to make into this fight. So you'll see some often dramatic effects going on. And now we hit a fork in the road. Round 3. End the fight, or escalate it. By the end of round 3, I feel like most players know how the fight's going. They've seen the major tricks of the enemies, they've already invested some of their abilities and consumables, and they'll probably know if they're entering cleanup mode or if the fight's going to keep on for another few rounds. For your everyday run-of-the-mill speed bumps in the dungeon, you just design them so that they're done by now. At the end of round 3, all the interesting stuff is done. You don't need to keep slugging it out with a group of zombies that fill this one room of 20 that you're going to be going through on your epic mega dungeon. You don't need to add twists and turns or escalations, you just end the fight here. Now, just because you're ending the fight by round 3 doesn't mean that has to be something anticlimactic. The bandits could surrender or bribe the players. Intelligent undead could coax them into letting them live so that they could guide them deeper into the dungeon. But regardless, the end of round 3 represents the conclusion of the combat. Though you don't have to make it fall flat, you can add a little roleplay or spice to the end. And to be honest, if there's one lesson you take from this video, it's that. End the fight when it's done. I can't count the number of times that the subsequent rounds 4, 5, 6, and so forth, have felt like foregone conclusions, where there's nothing really new happening. We've solved the puzzle, the combat puzzle that's been presented to us, and we're really just exchanging hit point totals at that point. So the other fork in the road you can do for round 3 is the escalation idea. And now I want to unpack what I mean by escalate, because I don't just mean numerical increases in difficulty. The end of round 3 should represent a recalibration of the fight. The parameters have changed. The players have to rethink their strategy, readjust, and start to run that calculus of how much to invest their resources in as they continue. It's not just a repetition of what rounds 1 and 2 were. Things are different now, and a different strategy may be required. Now, that could be something as simple as adding a few new enemies that pop up on the backline that were otherwise hidden, and now the lines of scrimmage have to be readjusted. That's one of the simplest ways. Maybe a pack of roving predators comes on the fight, drawn by the smell of spilt bandit blood, and now the players have to deal with that new threat as well. That's at least something to help change up the fight a bit and keep it interesting as you go on round by round. But I firmly believe that rather than simple numerical increases in difficulty, things that make them reframe the fight, change the objective, are one of the best ways to keep the fight moving and to keep your rhythm on pace. That reframing can occur when you shift the priorities of the fight and change it from one mode to another. Say you were in a skirmish, just an all-out brawl, over a MacGuffin in the middle of the room. Well, maybe one of the monsters gets the MacGuffin by the end of round 3, and it transforms them into some eldritch abomination that is way too powerful for the players to fight. It is now an escape scenario, where they must flee from this new monstrosity. And maybe that monstrosity kills the other cultists that were there, right? Gobbles them all up and starts bringing everything down. And now we have a totally different set of priorities for the players that is more than just a numerical increase in difficulty. Or maybe an NPC that the players were traveling with becomes suddenly jeopardized in an unexpected way. Some environmental hazard occurs, like a pathway crumbles to the lava below and the NPC is now dangling from the edge. This change in priority can help keep things fresh as you move into rounds 4 and 5. And now that escalation helps establish a new set of parameters, a new set of goals, and a new set of threats that then the players can engage with on the subsequent round, and then the fight either ends or escalates again. And creating that rhythm, that loop, can help keep things fresh even if you run one giant fight that lasts your whole session of 3 hours. It'll stay fresh and engaging the whole time as long as the parameters keep shifting. So let's look at a quick example of building an encounter with a 3-round rhythm in mind. Let's say the players are helping protect a group of settlers traveling out into the ruination to build a new town and expand the reach of humanity in a post-apocalyptic world. Along the way, they need to ford a small river, something that was dammed a long time ago, so is little more than a trickle at this point. But as they're crossing it, they're ambushed by bandits. So we've picked our type of combat. It's going to be an ambush. We set up the bandits all over the map. They've popped out of hiding among the trees and on the rocks, and they want the players' supplies. They want to rob the wagon train and leave them without their precious food, water, and medical supplies for their journey into the ruination. So we have some goals here. The bandits want the supplies, and they're willing to kill to get it. And the players simply want to get free of this ambush and move on into the ruination. They don't necessarily need to kill all the bandits, they just want to protect the supply chain. So round 1, we established. The bandits pop out of hiding, maybe they take some shots with their rifles and revolvers, and the players set up their battle lines, taking cover, starting to use abilities, and starting to fend things off. Then the engagement happens on round 2. The melee characters have made it to the bandits' line and started chopping them to pieces. Maybe people start using their supernatural edges to activate powerful abilities and buff their friends. And the bandits have really established how deadly they are by this point. And maybe they aren't that big of a deal, but there's a few tougher ones up in the rocks that are taking pot shots. The lines are established, the players known. So by the end of round 3, we need to decide if we want this fight to end or escalate. If we end it, we could just have the players successfully fend off the bandits, and maybe the bandits start surrendering when they get outnumbered and realize they have no chance of taking down this caravan, and we simply move on. But let's look at what happens if we decide to escalate from here. Maybe at the top of round 3, one of the NPCs, the only doctor on this caravan, is getting his wagon across, trying to avoid gunfire, and the wagon tips over midway through and pins the doctor underneath the rubble. And at that same time, maybe the bandits have blown the dam, thereby causing the water to rise really quickly. So the only doctor on this excursion and his medical supplies are at risk of drowning or being washed downriver. And now the fight has been reframed, refreshed. Some of the players are going to need to divert their attention away from the bandits and go help the doctor free. They'll also need to try to right the wagon before it gets washed downstream and all the medical supplies are lost. They'll have to balance between these two spinning plates, which one needs their attention, fighting off the bandits or saving the doctor. So then we start again. The players start engaging with this new mechanic, this new threat, trying to right the wagon, pull the doctor free, all while fending off those bandits. And now, by the next round, we have to decide, is the fight ready to end, or does it need to escalate again? Well, what if, when the bandits blew the dam, there was something buried underneath it? Something lurking under there that had been trapped for decades, like an undead or a construct. So now this washes downstream and pops out in the fight, ravenous for human flesh. And now the players get to engage with a new mechanic. They have a threat that they can't easily face alone, and so they can choose to maybe bargain with the bandits, convince them to team up with them and fend off this new monster. Or maybe they just simply flee, hoping that the bandits act as a speed bump to distract this blood oiler before it makes it to their caravan. These reframings of the fight, like the wagon tipping over in the river and the blood oilers showing up, are ways to also give players that have utility abilities a function in a fight. The strong man who can lift really heavy things suddenly can help lift that wagon. Or the charming character can try to convince the bandits to help them team up against this new threat. These sort of shifts in the narrative help highlight players of different builds within the same fight. And now, we probably wouldn't want to keep stretching this for another 3-round rhythm after the Blood Oilers show up, as that's getting a little bit excessive. We'd hope that by the time we get to that 3rd round again, the players have either escaped or have solved the fight by teaming up against the Blood Oiler and destroying it. But either way, we'd hope that things have now tied out. But if you really needed to, you could just keep escalating and keep modifying the fight as you go to keep things fresh. Now, you may be saying, but Peter, won't my players realize to just watch for every couple rounds, the fight's going to change? Maybe, but if you don't tell them about this process, you'll be surprised at how hidden it can feel by just having it below the surface of your encounter design. I've been using this as my guiding light for a very long time. I don't think any of my players realize that I'm doing it, because once you've mastered a 3-round rhythm, you can start to break it up a little bit and modify it. Because once you understand that rhythm and pacing using the 3-round rule, you can start to modify it as you see fit. Maybe you have something that shifts on round 2 and then the round immediately after that, or shifting every round, depending on the sort of pacing you're going for and how long you want that fight to last. It's a tool that can be used in a variety of ways. You don't have to stick to exactly 3 rounds, but that is a great starting point. The 3-round rhythm is really easy to implement in games that use side-based initiative like Tales from Elsewhere. In such a game, all of the players share one turn, during which they all use their actions whatever order they want, coordinating as they need. The threats do the same. So in such a structure, the threat turn acts as a way to define the parameters of the coming player turn, showing what challenges they need to face, what problems they need to solve, and this alternates as long as you need it to, simply assessing if it's time to end the fight or continue to escalate every few threat turns. And if you'd like to check out an implementation of the 3-round rhythm in a whole session, you can take a look at the Tales from Elsewhere Playtest Packet. In the Quick Start Guide, there is an adventure called The Last Train to Nowhere that sets up the 3-round rhythm in a very substantive and clear way. It follows the players as they are on a train traveling in the middle of the night through the ruination and what misfortunes befall them. And if you look closely, you'll see variations of the 3-round rhythm and how the pacing is set up for the storyteller. I recommend checking it out. We've got a link down below to the whole suite of playtest packets. There's the quick start guide that has the rules on how to play the game, there are some pre-gens, the one-shot adventure, and even rules for making your own characters in the system, all free to test out. So I recommend giving it a try and let us know how it went. You'll notice that in the adventure, a 3-round rhythm or a variation thereof is used throughout. So if you want to see a cool example, download that and let us know how it goes at home when you run it. So if all this was interesting to you, I recommend checking out the Patreon page, because we release a new video every week here on YouTube, but there's an additional video that's easily 15 to 20 more minutes of content that's called Sheriff's Office Hours. And in those videos, I go through things I had to cut from this video, or things that I've learned since then, go through the comments and questions from patrons and people in the YouTube comments section. And it's a lot of fun to go unfiltered and unedited and just engage directly with the Patreon community. So if that sounds cool, definitely consider becoming a patron. All of the income from that page goes to help support the creatives behind this Tales from Elsewhere project, whether that's the artists that are making the beautiful and terrifying artwork for the monsters for the rulebook, or the editors working on this YouTube channel itself. So please consider becoming a patron and helping support all the creatives that make all this possible. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week on Tales from Elsewhere.